I'm opening. We have an eye, sort of a nostril, 2 teeth. One of the teeth has a small cavity. Close call, folks, but I think we got here just in time.
Presented by Maria Menounos and Kevin Undergaro. This is Anatomy of a Movie. In-depth discussions and breakdowns of various movie titles. And now that you've seen the movie, let the dissection begin.
Welcome, my friends, to another battle of the gods. I'm your host, Phil Svitek, joined alongside Dimitri Panos.
Long live Athens.
We had to bring a Greek on board. And Sarah Stratton, not Greek.
I'm not Greek. I'll represent the Persians.
You know,
I'll be the villain at the table.
I will represent the one and only Greek that will be in 300.
That is
And we have Marissa Serafini.
Hello, everyone.
And the music stylings of Junkie Extra Large.
Yeah.
So the follow-up to 300, obviously if you're listening, we're doing 300, Rise of an Empire, the follow-up to 300, but in many ways it's a prequel.
I'd say
It's
more
an
of a
equal.
companion.
Oh my gosh.
It's an
prologue.
equal.
It's a meanwhile. While this is going on, this
Yeah.
other part is going on.
You know, the creators called it a companion, which I think is a fitting term.
They actually call it a prequel sequel. It's an equal.
I mean,
which is
that
fun.
was the
I
quote.
loved all the nuggets that, how it tied back into so many of the various things.
That actually was probably, to me, the most clever aspect of... because I didn't see it coming. They don't showcase it necessarily in the marketing. The marketing, the trailers and everything really said that this was going to be a sequel, because they show Leonidas, in the trailer and such. But, it was always a wonder, so where are they going to go? So running the concurrent story, as this one does to that, I thought was that's a clever way to do this. And that's a very smart way.
Yeah, I mean, it was so hard. Like, you had Leonidas and the 300 die, or almost all of the 300 die. Like, how do you go after that? And we got, at the end of 300, the original, we got that start of an epic battle scene on, some hillside. And then you're transported, and that's what I thought we were going to see. And then it was instead this whole naval battle, which I just found so much fun and so interesting because it's not something that I've seen very often. So I think it was probably the most surprising point for me was the basis of this movie, that it was going on at the same time and wasn't what I expected. I also liked that the main focus was kind of on the villain. It was on her versus some, obviously we had Sullivan leading the Greek side.
Yeah,
Themistocles. Call him the Athenian. It's
The
easier.
Athenian.
That's what that was the insulting thing by the Spartans to him. You Athenian.
You Athenian. Yeah, Themistocles.
Yeah,
That's pretty much easy
I
for
agree.
me to say.
I like the new version of this kind of story because with the original 300, we had the whole battle on dry land, and then we had this humongous battle with more people on the water, which I thought was a nice play. And I liked how they took the non-linear kind of aspect for this film because we had a lot of flashbacks and then that leading up to the current story that ties in with the original 300 and then going past that point. So I thought that was really nice how they executed it.
And they kept in the obviously visual stylings of 300, but more importantly, the retelling of the story. Right, we open up pretty much like last one. We begin where we end in some sense, and the queen is telling her story to the Spartans. So that was a nice through line.
I did affectionately nickname this movie 300 The Rise of Exposition. There was one thing about this movie where there was we're just going to stop the movie now and give you a bunch of exposition. And I was like, okay, we could get on. But what I getting to your point, at the beginning, it was fine because it was setting it up. But it just seemed for me that there were many places where it just stopped to give us exposition. And I was like, sort of kind of getting it already. And it's like, oh, more exposition.
But I disagree because I felt like this film was really trying to flesh out the world of 300. So we were getting like you get the bookends of Queen Gora's speech, and then within that you get like story within story within story. You're doing a lot of, I guess, like time travel almost with your mind, and I thought that was interesting because it was happening a lot in the beginning. But for me, that also drew me out of the fact of I went into this movie being like, okay, like you, Sarah, you love these type of movies. You love like the crazy, fantastical, like ancient Greece, ancient mythology. Like I love all that. And I was like, do not try and compare this exactly to the first 300. Because the first 300 was very, it was unexpected. Like people didn't, it wasn't known that it was going to get this huge fan base. And
they sort of kind of did. The movie like was huge. The movie did like 75
But you didn't
million.
expect everyone to go around like screaming, "This is Sparta," and like.
I don't know. Like Warner Brothers when it came out, yeah, they actually had this pegged as being.
I think
like
as an audience member, when I went into the original 300, I had no idea what to really expect.
Yeah. No.
And then going into this one, I didn't want to think, oh, compare this to Gerald Butler in 300. I didn't want to nitpick and think, oh, that was better here. He was a better hero here. I really wanted to go into this just willing to like embrace the world. And the fact that they did add so much that you had to think about in the beginning and that they were pulling you through like time and space.
Wow, you really thought about it? See, again, there wasn't much that there wasn't anything to think about. They really did like lay out their roadmap. And again, going back to their clever device was running it concurrently with the events that happened in 300.
But in the very beginning, they weren't running it concurrently. In the beginning, you have Lena who's, ahead of time. And then you have, she goes back to the start of before Xerxes was a god king.
Right, which was
so
nice.
That's pulling you back,
which was nice.
History there.
Sure, and that was
I
good
think
play.
That drawing those different stories, it made the audience have to be like, wait, where are we? What story are we telling? And it drew away from the fact, like it brought in a different point of view. And I think that not going directly to expectations with those first couple of scenes was smart.
Yeah, I mean, no, listen, they gave you backstory to Xerxes, which is fine because
I think,
it didn't bother me.
It was very much deliberate in a comic book sense. It was very, and I think in some ways, it's deliberate in the sense that in Greece and especially in these early times, these stories were told over fires and things like that, and so it felt almost like that, except in a weird, different medium. Because obviously, you're watching someone kind of retelling a story, but in a movie theater.
Sure,
you know what I mean. But
absolutely.
I didn't mind it. There's definitely movies that are just so exposition heavy. Because they have no other way. This was very deliberate choice, and it wasn't for lack of creativity. It was for hey, we're gonna make a statement.
Yeah, well, no, they made a statement, and again, I didn't mind the backstory to Xerxes. Like, that's good for like where he comes from and how he became to be, and it furthered, the implication of how Sparta got in the war, and how the Athenians and I got all that. That's fine. It just seemed it went very well into the movie where there just seemed to be scenes where it stopped to do some more storytelling, and it was like, they could have done that, I think, whether it be editing, which they did, because they would go back to the battle of 300 and stuff. So I don't know. Like I said, I felt this movie had a lot of exposition going for it.
And I'm not this
coupled with slow-mo.
I'm not saying that it didn't have a lot of exposition. I'm saying that I liked the exposition. I liked the storytelling. Like I think that was very much what you said. Like that's what this is all about. It's about all these stories and these like, fanciful versions of histories. And you brought up the introduction of Xerxes' background, and that to me I just found so crazy, because when I think of the actor in this movie, it's so different and incredible, the makeup they do on him, that literally I was like, wait, is that the same actor? Did they hire a different actor to play like beginning Xerxes and then another one to play like God King? But I was like, because he looks so incredibly different. The only like similar feature that stands out is his eyes.
Yeah.
Everything else you think was like digital or literally another human being. And I was like, it made me like pull back a second, and I was like, oh wow, they do a really good job making him up into his god king self.
Well, before we get into that, since we're talking story primarily, this was obviously based off of Frank Miller. Yeah. But it was based off of, so was 300, and this, I imagine as this franchise continues, which there's no way it can't. It was from a comic book that isn't yet published.
Right.
Keyword being yet, because now with this, it's just makes sense to publish it.
Yeah, and we'll see how closely it relates, because at the time, the way I understand it, like they're like, okay, everybody's dead. How are we going to do this? And Zack Snyder said, well,
the director
of 300
and the writer of Rise of Empire.
So yeah, and he smartly and wisely said, well, listen, we can't do this without the input of Frank Miller, and we know that he's working on something, but it's not out yet. And so they went and talked to him, and Frank Miller gave his input, like without even having his books done. He says, okay, this is a good way to go, and stuff, and Frank Miller's input, although he may not have like put pen to paper to write the screenplay here, his fingerprints are all over it. Yeah. So, and it was a wise choice. And I'm going to say too, and I'm going to put this right here, I am not a Zack Snyder hater. I've seen this guy in interviews. One of the things that I like, he loves movies. He loves this stuff. And undeniably, whether there are a lot of haters out there, people think they hate him, but you can't take away the fact that the first 300, what he accomplished, and he did create this visual style that has now been done ad nauseum. It's almost become cliche, but he made that style, and with 300 and what he did with Watchmen, which I always think is just a lose-lose situation. Listen, I enjoyed Watchmen. I really liked Watchmen as well, but people complain that he was too faithful to the book. Yet those same people, if he had strayed away, they would have complained about him not using. But he did a really good job, and he did Dawn of the Dead, and which was a decent remake of the George Romero classic. So Man of Steel is very debatable in a lot of circles. Sucker Punch to me it's a guilty pleasure. I can't say it's a good movie, but I see what he was doing, and I had fun watching it. The guy loves movies, and he loves, and he's very animated about that. He's definitely not an Uwe Boll. He's a decent director. He knows the shots that he's getting, and he loves directing action. And I'm really glad that, he was to direct this. But then he got Man of Steel. So what are you going to do? I can do a sequel that I've already done. I'm going to get Man of Steel, but I'm going to stay producing it, and I'm going to help write out the script. And to me, that's not abandoning your kids. That's good. And
I like this for that, because it because it is slightly different. It allows a different feel to it, which, it had elements of Zack Snyder, the typical camera zoom in shot,
sure,
to focus on. Most times it was Ava Green.
Yeah.
But there was other places too, but that's his typical shot.
Right.
You know what I mean? But it also had different elements and things like that I imagine this director put in as well.
Yeah. So and this director, I believe it's Noam Morrow, the G is silent. He was a commercial director. He came up similar to Zack Snyder as well. You could sort of kind of tell it in this movie. But he did a very capable job, if not heavily relying on the slow-mo stuff, which, in certain aspects, I was getting sort of tired of it. But for the whole, what they did too. Anybody here see it in 3D?
I did, yeah.
Yeah. Now, I saw it in 3D, and man, I was like, hey, I'm glad I'm seeing this in 3D. There was dust everywhere, and one thing I noticed, early on, they took time to. Whenever the characters were talking, even if it was just dialogue, but there was dust everywhere. It was in the foreground. It was in the background. It was all swirling around. And I'm like, I would have hated to have been the compositor or stuff who had to put in so much dust, but it looked great. It looked great.
And again, I think it stems, in that respect, it stems from the vision of the script, showing that, war is ugly. Xerxes in particular, right? He's overlooking the empire. And not his emperor. This is later in the movie. But we'll definitely talk about
After
that
he's
show.
conquered Athens.
Yeah, and there's just fire everywhere, and like, hey, he's looking so glorious, and like, this is your glory. It's just fire everywhere, and it looks like crap.
Yeah.
And so I think they really did a good job of showing that, like, this is what it's all about.
Yeah. Yeah, it's going to be interesting because I was wondering what they were going to wrap up and not wrap up in this movie too. And obviously there's still some story. I mean,
here's the thing,
Xerxes.
I mean, in terms of that, it was a great movie, and it was such a great lead up, and then I was like, wait, that's it?
That's it.
That's it? That's it?
Yeah.
Really? We're right at the gate.
Yeah,
we're ready to go.
There was no comeuppance, so to speak, for Xerxes. And, eventually, I think, well, maybe the next movie will get that story because there is a little bit more to tell.
Well, because we're at
I think you can just see that
we're
through
in the middle.
how...
We're at the gate. There's no way we can't not have a battle there.
Right.
And you're going to, but I think that this movie it really wasn't as much about Xerxes. It was about Artemisia, and like that's why so much of the focus was on her, and so you had the conclusion of her death because that was so much the focus of this film was, Artemisia and Themistocles kind of being each other's yin and yang, and whether it's at war or like some, who knows, forced love, I don't know, but they were I don't know how to even describe their relationship, but they definitely were each other's other half.
Yeah, they're the same sides of the opposite.
Let's talk about her specifically, in terms of character and as a plot device, because it's very much. But obviously, everyone loves her electrifying performance. Like, it just blew everyone away. That's what everyone's talking about.
Yeah, Artemisia.
But she joined the Persians because, as we find out in the backstory, she was raped countless times,
right?
And that's why she hates the Greeks. And I don't know how to feel about it. Like, it doesn't make her bad. I don't, she's not a villain. I understand where she's coming from.
I agree. I was trying to figure out why, because it said that she's Greek born, and I was trying to going, okay, so then what the hell is going on?
There was this other uprising in Greece that was started by people of Greek descent, and they basically fought another city-state or whatnot, and it was something that they were ashamed of, and she got the brute, or like the worst hand in this ordeal, like her family was murdered, all this stuff. On top of that, I do want to point out that supposedly this is historically inaccurate. I don't blame that for them. I don't blame them for it at all.
Shocker.
Yeah.
but like not that she was Greek. Like supposedly in history, Artemisia was of Greek descent, but it was purely because of some she had a thirst for war. It wasn't. There's no identifying cause that it was because of a tragedy she went through. So they added that for this film. And I'm not blaming them for that. I think it's good. I think it's good character development. I think it gives her a good spot to come from. It gives her character an arc. You're not just oh, this is some villainous woman who's vengeful for no reason. They gave her her ambition and her bloodthirst a real backbone. And
yeah. Again, I'll just.
I want to cut because Marissa, go ahead. You had something to say.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna talk about because the Greek killed her family, so she had this revenge-like attitude towards the Persians and just or towards the Greeks, and also Artemisia didn't really lead the Persian fleet and stuff like that. So Artemisia did exist, but of course, in filmmaking, you're going to have to change characters up a bit. But in an interview, Eva Green mentioned that she went into this kind of character with the Amazonian kind of Cleopatra mentality and how she depicted this character, which because we know Artemisia, she was a very strong person, and that was her way of getting into this character and how she wanted to portray it.
And I think she did a wonderful job. I think one of the moments that stands out for me is, she's obviously such a beautiful woman and a strong woman.
Don't say the sex scene.
I'm not actually going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about how there's this frame or this moment of her walking through up to, I believe it's when King King Darius's deathbed.
Uh-huh.
And instead of the villainous walk that's like very like typical like sexy, like leaves your shoulders, hips, like she has this almost like hunch, and she's just like powering through. And that to me was just like, it was pretty early in the film, and I was like, oh, this is kind of gonna be a different woman. Like, she's not trying to be pretty in this film. It was just very much like attacking, and I loved it. I thought it was so different, and it was a profile view of her just walking, and it was like one of my favorite instances in the whole film, just because it was so different.
Yeah, no, I like the character. Again, I'm just confused as to, I don't know if she's Greek born. I don't know why the Greeks had such hatred for her family. Like, that wasn't, her genesis wasn't so.
It wasn't her family. It was a battle that happened within.
Yeah, but
Greeks
it was never
themselves.
really like, I'm not a Greek historian, and if there was a Greek civil war, I understand why they put it in there, and it does give backbone to her. Like, you understand, and it isn't just, it is about vengeance, and it's about vengeance about Athens and why she's, all for the, I'm Persian, but it was funny because there came a point in the end where I was sort of kind of like, there was a good chemistry between her and Themistocles. And it was an interesting chemistry, but it was a chemistry that worked. And, when they're fighting and all, I was sort of kind of hoping that maybe she wasn't going to die. Well, yeah, maybe she wasn't going to die because she saw that the Persians sort of kind of sucked, and that her god king actually sort of kind of said, hey, you know what? You're really not,
But that was
I don't have faith in you, I thought maybe, but then I was like going, nah, there's no way. After the way they killed her parents, raped her mother right in front of her, then killed her, and then she gets raped countless of times on that boat, and then she's left for dead in the side of a street. I'm like, yeah, you don't get over that.
That to me was the sad. It's understated. I don't think this is where people aren't given as much credit. Like, she just didn't belong anywhere. She didn't belong with the Greeks, and she certainly did. By the end, she didn't belong with the Persians,
right?
For the reasons you mentioned, and also no one could, no one equaled her strength in the Persian army, right? Her whole goal was to find, like, hey, my right hand person. She couldn't find anybody. It had to be him. Yeah. He's Greek. And he's not going to do it.
He chose Greece. Like, that was his whole thing, was like he had this love for Mother Greece. And I think that's such a good point. That really she was all alone. And by the very end, like, she had really no choice, like, but to fight till the death.
Yeah.
And it's like, if she had succeeded and won the battle, like, what would have even happened to her, So I think that's a great character choice, that she did have, like, those layers and wasn't just pure evil, and also that they gave, like, Xerxes his layers, and I think that they attempted to give Themistocles his layers with putting some weight on his shoulder for maybe being the cause of this whole war in the first place by killing the king. For me, that didn't carry through as much. I think that I was just ready to, like, embrace him as kind of a hero and a good warrior and strategist, so I didn't really need as much.
Yeah, well, but his was the impetus. He even admits, or there's someone telling the story that admits that it was that arrow that could have caused it. I mean, basically what we ended up having is a Hatfields and McCoys situation. He kills the father. The son sees this. He's going to go seek out revenge, and he becomes this god king. And so it's all over vengeance. It's all over, you killed my dad. I'm coming after you, and I'm going to bring my big army in. Sparta gets into the war. And I mean, there are all these layers that are set up, yes, but they're set up on such a, when you think about it, like, there's nothing new to this kind of tale of war and revenge. It's been told in Westerns. It's been told so it was just interesting, just visually, how they put it all together and how they place this story. And this is one of the assets of this movie, as to how it sets up this side of the war, because in 300 we only got really the Spartan side.
Yeah.
And and I did like how, like, Themistocles went to Queen Gorgo to say, hey, you know what, we need to band together, and you have the impetus. So and again, it's one of those things where it was running concurrent. I have to say, the one thing in all the research that I was reading about, the one thing that I didn't see, so it could be a first here, nobody's mentioned that it sort of kind of plays like, for you R.R. Martin fans and Game of Thrones fans, this sort of kind of plays like the book Feast for Crows, where that story runs concurrently with another story in Game of Thrones. And this really, that was like one of the first things I said, wow, that this is being put on film. And in a sense, I've never seen it done before in like trilogies. We don't see it in The Hobbit as much, or we never saw it in the Star Wars trilogy, where they say, hey,
Sure, it's a much more fantasy genre.
so I appreciated it for that. And I thought, and again, if you're going to write a sequel to a movie where all your main characters die, this is the way to do it. And it was fun.
What I liked about I'm gonna keep calling him
The
the Athenian. The Athenian.
Themistocles.
I liked, you guys are saying that he didn't quite have the weight of the world on his shoulders, so to speak, or at least it wasn't as felt. To me, it worked out well in the sense, we got the couple of battles at war, and what I liked about it is he looked at everything positive, we have small ships, they have 1,000. That makes us stealth, so let's go. And they were able to win that battle, and then they lured him into the, to the cliffs and get him that way. And then, on the third day, it was just, that's when we start really losing and things like that.
Yeah.
So I liked how he was able to kind of deal with that. And so he always starts off what may seem good, all of a sudden turns for the worst.
Yeah. And I also like that he had a very different essence than Leonidas and Gerard Butler had. Like, he didn't, although he's obviously a very strong warrior guy, like, there was a very more friendly demeanor to him. I felt like I didn't feel like he was a warrior king. I felt like he was a warrior who was like amongst his troops. And I liked that he wasn't just trying to imitate what had done before. He took the role on his own, and his speeches, they just had a different essence to me. They weren't as like guttural force. They were very much like, okay, let's take in this situation and we're going to do this battle right. And it was very sophisticated, and I did really enjoy that about him. And I also liked the playing field of this movie, like just the battle sequences they had and using the ocean and the Navy. And I hope we get more into that because I thought it was fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, Themistocles to me is like, he's sort of, well, the one thing that you didn't mention, the reason why, I mean, Sparta is Sparta. They're built for war. So Leonidas, he is a warrior. The one thing that Leonidas really isn't so much is a politician. Themistocles is a politician. And so through his gregariousness, so to speak, his being an Athenian and standing up for democracy, he knows the rules of democracy. He also knows the rules of politics. He knows who to chum up. So that, like, he plays that game very well. And by doing it so well, he can gain, his troops and followers. I will say that the speeches, again, those are one of those things like, oh, here we go, another speech again. He did speak differently than Gerard Butler delivered those lines, but I did think that there was a sense that they were trying to imitate those rousing, yelling speeches, and I was like, okay, he's not Leonidas. But I like the character of Themistocles because he was different. The Athenians and Spartans are different people altogether, and
but to me, if I have one nitpick, they said we're farmers and poets and whatever, and I was like, you guys are pretty buff poets.
Yes. Well, when you're working out in the farms.
Well, I think that was...
Farmers, I understand.
No, I think that was an ode to the original when the Spartans were making fun of the other army. Then,
right.
Spartans were like, we were trained and built to fight wars, and then you guys have metal, blacksmiths and writers and stuff like that. And so I think that was just like a jab to the original.
I get that. They were just a little bit more buff than a normal poet to me would look like.
Plato was a pretty buff guy.
So that was my only nitpick.
Yeah, I don't know.
I'm not a fan of the 300 workout.
The 300.
I mean, hey, man.
It's gotten a lot of publicity.
I'll
and new
watch
controversy.
300. That's about the extent of how I work out. But the other thing too that I just found funny. It's not a nitpick. It happens in every type of nationality or movie, and it happens here in the States a lot too. For Greek characters, your Athenians, your Spartans, all your Greek characters, man, they had the best English, Irish, Scottish accents that one could have. Like, it was just really funny to me that one guy even attempted to do sort of a Grecian accent or anything like that. So I found that sort of funny. As being Greek myself, I'm like, what? They couldn't hire a Greek to play like one role or something? But hey.
I'm sure there's one in there somewhere.
I was looking. Look at that. I mean, Sullivan Stapleton. Yeah, it's a great Greek name. Lena Headey, Hans Matheson. Hans
I'm
is
sure
very.
you have to get towards the lower end.
Rodrigo Santoro, Jack O'Connell, Igal Naor.
Rodrigo Santoro is supposed to be Persian. Come on.
So Stephen Cree. I love this one. Stephen Cree, decapitated Greek Marine. That's good. Put that on there. Hey, I was a decapitated Greek Marine in 300 Rise of an Empire. Again, it wasn't anything that I'm really nitpicking. It was just something that I found funny as I'm watching the movie.
Well, as we're talking about the cast, so we've mentioned, Eva Green, and she got asked to do this role. She was like, I'll absolutely, yeah, of course I'll take it. And she has a history with Frank Miller films. She's also in Sin City, correct?
She's coming out in the next
one. What is it called? Sin City.
A Dame to Kill For.
There you
Great
go.
title.
So we can look forward to in that.
Well, this supposedly fulfilled a dream for her. She'd always kind of wanted to play like an action hero. She got the action villain, but I think that's definitely just as good. And on top of that, with Eva, like supposedly she was their number one choice. Mm-hmm. And if she had said no, they literally had no one else that they wanted.
Yeah, they had no plan B.
They didn't know that Sarah Stratton was available at the time.
They didn't.
They didn't ask us.
Listen, I like, Eva Green, for me, really stood out in Casino Royale. She set up a great femme fatale for James Bond, and she was fantastic. And I really, Casino Royale is a great Bond film, and in part because of the chemistry that Daniel Craig had with Eva Green. And there are some moments in that I'd never seen in any other Bond film before. And part of the reason why they worked was because of Eva Green. And I was always hoping that she could find another role that would equal that, because she was a good, strong woman, and she was in this, iconic action movie where, Bond can overshadow everything else, but it didn't happen with her character in that. And in this movie, and again, I think it was a very wise choice where, you focus a lot on Eva Green, and it's a good, strong woman character, regardless of whether or not she's the villain. They gave us the reason she wasn't a villain for villain's sake. My one little caveat, if I'm going to talk about what I wish there was more Lena Headey. Once she started kicking ass, I wanted to see more of her during that too. But Eva Green she really was
for the third
standout.
movie.
I will say,
she was a standout.
I'm a big fan of both these actresses, and especially I'm a Game of Thrones fan, so I love Lena Headey. But what I wanted, and I'll agree with you, is I kind of wanted the two women to head off.
I thought that was going to happen.
At some point, I was just waiting for that moment, because they both did so well being powerful that you wanted to see them collide. I do understand that they needed to kind of give Artemisia her finale with Themistocles, because they were each other's match, and they showed so much of their arcs together. Yeah. On top of it, they had basically matching scars, on the same arm. It was just very obvious that they made this circle.
Right.
I wanted Queen Gara to come in there and just them have this epic battle and then return and she can face off, but I guess that wouldn't have really made sense.
I think we saw a lot of these two female strong leading characters, which I thought was nice how they did that in this movie, because they were the original 300. We didn't see a lot of female characters. There were only one here and there. Mm-hmm. But this one we had two strong females, and I think with Lena Headey's character, we got a lot of her voiceover, which brought the more emotional narrative side to this story, and brought the, because I believe it was Delios in the first 300 narrated that one, and then we had Lena in this one telling this story. Yeah. And then, but I love Eva Green because I don't know if you ever watched the Starz short-lived show Camelot. She played Morgan Pendragon, very, very dark, very evil, very vengeful, vindictive person. So I kind of liked seeing Eva play up that part again in this role. And Eva mentioned in interviews that she did a lot of training for the sword fighting, and like she did a lot of core strength and stuff. And she said it was fun. And she says, because I know her playing a lot of evil, dark characters, or the villains, so to speak. And she says she likes playing those roles because they're more interesting and they're more fun to play with. And I think she did a great job in it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to. I think it's either a Showtime or a Cinemax or some cable channel. I think it's called Pennywise Dreadful, and she's like the lead in that as well. And the clips I've seen, she looks good. It also helps, at least from my perspective. She's just drop dead beautiful, I think. And again, if you're gonna pick a woman in a Bond to be the femme fatale, she better be good looking. And there's something about her eyes. There's something about her facial features. I just find her to be a very well put together. She's a very beautiful woman. She's striking.
Oh, completely.
And she really, like, I believe her as an action person in 300 very well. And she didn't cheap it out. There was nothing that was cliche, so to speak, about her performance. It was very good.
And I think that was encouraged by like how they filmed this on set. So supposedly, Noam is a big fan of. He wanted this not to seem just like natural acting. He wanted it to be very theatrical, very dramatic and large, and he would increase that environment with like operatic music on the set and all the such. And I think that really probably helped her, and just embracing that, because she's so striking that when you add that drama on top of it, I think that's what really pulls you in. It's just giving her like this power and this build, and she really owns it. And I think it's very understandable why they thought that there was no one else, because she demands your attention in this movie. As for Lena, I thought Lena had a very big, it was a struggle for her. She supposedly shot for 10 days, which was a really short shoot to do all these scenes, and she had to be jumping between like such emotional differences. Like part of her scenes in this film, her husband's alive and well, she's going to war, like she's mad at the whole empire. Then the second half, her husband's dead. Like she had to go through all of these different like mind settings and circumstances, from rallying the troops to like saying they're never going to war, like, and doing this all in 10 days. Like that sounds crazy. So I think that to come across as like a strong woman and to do this again after like also a big break from this role, I think that must have been a lot of emotional stress.
Yeah, I mean, she's a good actress. The first time I ever saw her was in the Sarah Connor Chronicles, which,
TV series.
The television series, and yeah, I don't know if any other Sarah Connor Chronicles,
I was
but no,
if people were thinking about the Terminator and like.
No, and she was. It was a very short. It was unfortunately, sadly, a short-lived show. It was very well done, but her as Sarah Connor, like, big shoes to fill. You got Linda Hamilton, who made that role, and then they pick her for this television show, but she was great. She was really good. When she had to handle action, she's fantastic. And obviously audiences has come to more know her as Queen Cersei. And that character in the book is just like seethes evilness, and in the television show, she's
evil, fantastic. But she has a heart. Her heart's just black.
Yeah, it's black, but she's very, very good. And it's sort of kind of refreshing to see good, strong women in these roles. Like I could see Alina Headley being like a Ripley-ish kind of character, and even Eva Green, if she ever decided to take on a more action kind of a role that's a good, strong role. Yeah, I think they're very, very adept. Very.
I want to talk about the father and the son, because I thought that was an interesting storyline. And how kind of
in the Athenian army.
Yes.
Okay.
What did you guys think of their dynamic, whether as actors or just from a story perspective?
I think it was a good parallel. Like, to me, there's a lot of father-son relationships throughout the 300 series. First you get that with Gerard Butler and like the raising of his son in the first, and also how he starts out a boy, and that was the training base. But to me, there was always that kind of legacy of war within Sparta. And then for here in this movie, they kind of carried on that theme, both with Xerxes and King Darius and like their father-son relationship. And then this was the other side, the Athenian version of that. And I think that they always kind of have those themes present, like that family, like the legacy of war, the legacy of power.
Sometimes it was headed on, these young children are now memories and things like that. They definitely hit it on the head. But in terms of them, what I liked about it, there was that line when the father says, like, the son says to him, we got to fight for our country, we got to die for our country. And, he asks, what idiot taught you that? My father. And I think obviously a comedic line, but I think it's very telling in terms of like what has, in terms of Xerxes, like what drove him to like this war,
right,
and everything, everything else. And sometimes like, yeah, you know what, I shouldn't have listened to my stupid father.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Oh no, it's a good point. I'm gonna bring up like a Greek aspect. It would be tough to have to not include the family aspect when you're making a movie about Greece, about Greeks, about, even though you're messing around with history, like, but that's the who cares thing. But I think it's difficult in a thing like this. The Greek, one thing about Greek, it's always about the Greek family and the togetherness and everything like that. So the way this played out, I thought it was really done well. I liked it. It gave a little bit of added, a little level more of like drama, so to speak, but I thought it wasn't overplayed. It wasn't the they could have played it where the father is just so upset that he denounces the child for going behind his back. It wasn't like that.
And we were introduced to the father as a spy on the ship, and I really like that scene. A man's hands can tell so much, and so each of them had scenes outside of this. They were characters outside of this. And they just happened to be father and son, and had to deal with this on top of everything else.
Yeah, I think it's just like adding dimension. And as I said before, I think that drawing on classic themes they had, because we did see a father-son also in battle in 300. If you remember, it was the opposite though, where one of Leonidas's like basically leading like comrades, his son came and he was very proud of him, and he was very like, he's going to go to war and be the best hero in the world, and then his son dies, which caused him to seek vengeance, and he like all of a sudden became like empowered and like crazy fighter and killed so many people, yada yada. And then here we kind of saw the opposite, where like bless you Phil.
Thank
where you. It was the father was reluctant, the father then passes, like they switch it up and they give you different plays on this story. But I agree also with Dimitri that you can't have Greeks without family.
Yeah, you can. And but they didn't, again, like the father at first was not like necessarily on board, but then he sort of kind of, okay, yeah, Themistocles, like rightfully so, is like, we need whatever we can, and you know what, this kid's proving himself, don't be upset with him. And the father being upset, but then in the battle he sees how his son performs and he's like, yeah, you are becoming a man, and that is something to be proud of. So at least when Silius passes, it wasn't forced, like, oh, Dad, I'm sorry I said this, and like there was no guilt, like, and it just, he accepted his son. His son was becoming a warrior. His son was adept at what he did, and and we know that Silius was very adept at what he did as well. And it didn't bother me. It wasn't played on the cheap, so to speak. But it was done well.
Let's move into the shooting style of this. And part and parcel with that is the visual effects. You can't kind of get away from that while talking about the cinematography.
I think that this movie is it's so hard to separate like visual style from how they shot, from sound, because I mean they have like some behind the scenes footage of this movie. You can find it online, and they show it where they have like
the sets are so small.
Yeah,
right.
It's just literally like, okay,
it was a dry set for a movie that was encompassed by so much water. It was a dry set, like they were in sound stages, which to me is actually sort of kind of incredible, because there were parts where, I said, oh, all right, somebody has to dive into something or other, but there was no water, at all. So, yeah, and we'll maybe talk about this later, but then when we talk about cinematography, that has to come into play in this movie.
Well, see, they all intersect so well, which is why it's so enrapturing. Like
the shot of Xerxes when he becomes God King and goes to his empire, and there's just. And I don't know what it's like in 2D, but seen in 3D,
oh my
just
God.
this vast expanse, and then we move and we move and we move and we see.
I got vertigo.
Yeah, it was insane.
It was crazy. I got vertigo.
And you know what? The unfortunate thing is for him as an actor, he had to imagine that because I'm sure it was just like this little wooden ledge that he went on to, and he's like 2 feet above everything else. Right. But for us, again, perfect marriage of everything. And that was the best shot for me in the movie.
I have to say that for me, what really took the cake were all of the water scenes, because I did think that those were just done so well, and I knew that it was using green screen and using technology for all this, and compiling those shots and making battles on water crazy, from in the middle of a storm to the stillness to the fog.
Mm-hmm.
I just thought it was so technically done well, and it was beautiful. And yes, some of it was kind of over the top, like the giant moon, but I liked the lighting of the moon.
That was my favorite scene. I thought that was my favorite scene right there, when Themistocles is going over to Artemisia's ship, mm-hmm. and he's in his little rowboat, and the moon, it just reminded me of something out of like Joe versus the volcano, the moon and the stars. And again, in 3D, the stars were layered. Like, the stars were even in 3D, and the way that it was shot, I was like, all right, this is probably my favorite shot in this movie. I really love how they're playing up this moonlight, because it's so hyper real, so to speak. But it was beautiful. I mean, and again, if you have the chance, hopefully you viewers have seen it in 3D. But yeah, it's, for me in this movie, I was not disappointed.
Go ahead, Marissa.
I think that the camera work also in this movie was very technically well done, because we know in the first 300 that there were some shots of Leonidas just taking out like 8 to 10 people all in one long shot, and then we kind of got that feel again with Themistocles, where he jumps onto, or like he rides a horse onto, like from 3 boats, and just tracking him the whole time. And then there was another shot where he just takes out 8 people in a matter of like 30 seconds, just like following him and tracking him throughout all the cinematography and the choreographing. I thought was really, really well executed.
I mean, in terms of the fighting, and this isn't I mean this in a positive way, it felt like a great video game.
Yeah. I mean,
it was.
Yeah, it was.
The moves were really smooth. I mean, they were the best fighters and everything. You know what I mean? And they used this multiple times, but the men jumping down, right? Yeah. They've used that in the first movie, and in this movie, that seems to be their staple. And then the guy jumping, and then we follow him down the jump.
Yeah, they did that a lot. I mean, again, to me, the heavy use of the slow-mo. And the exorbitant amount of fake blood, or the CGI blood that was like going on. You either go for it or you don't. It almost became for me a little bit monotonous, because again, it's just the style that at this point, after what Zack Snyder was able to accomplish, it's almost become cliche. And I have to say that when I saw the trailer for this, I was like going, oh boy, here we go again. And, but there were scenes in which I thought that it really worked well.
But they did it, remember, we're talking about the scene with the father, right? And her. And so, and she cut off that Greek's head. And that was just so brutal, the way they did it. And so they were able to do some of this stuff in a new way. And again, it is their style. So to me, it's not cliche, but when she kissed him, that head,
that
and then tossed it.
Yeah, tosses it over, yeah.
And I will say, I think that there is obviously the expectation, but if it didn't have that, if we didn't have the slow-mos with the dramatic sounds and the blood and the slashing, it wouldn't be a 300 film, and I would be disappointed. So I needed it. I want it to be there. I want those signature moves to play some point in the movie, even signature lines like "This is Sparta" made an appearance in this film,
right.
And that's why you got sucked in the first time to his style. So I want to see those things again.
Yeah.
Marissa?
I like the drawn out shots here and there. It got us the feel to the original, and I think it enhanced the fighting. It was like even more grander than what might have really gone down. But I think it was used a lot over and over again. Especially there was this one shot where he's like, no, it was so long, drawn out, and then that was the point. I was like, okay, we get it.
Well, the interesting thing is that the movie was shot over 8 months at a soundstage in Bulgaria for tax credit purposes.
That's what I was gonna say.
Yeah,
I was like, if you're just shooting in a soundstage, why are you dragging all your actors to Bulgaria?
Yeah, they got a great tax break, and the director, he wanted to make it larger in scope, which in a sense he did. I mean, from a storytelling standpoint, and
I mean, their widescapes. They kept going to Athens. Your crown
Absolutely.
city, and we kept seeing that, and they definitely showed a great landscape.
Absolutely, and. But it was so funny that they worked on this movie so much, and even the director was like, there was so much every day in and day out. All I'm looking at is green or emerald. And when I was done with this, he goes, I had everything green removed from my house. He's like, I needed to step back from this. And I'm like, I guess I would never think of that. But he was like, yep, I even took out Greek history books. If I had a Greek ship at my house, it was out of there. He goes, I just needed I needed an adjustment period. And I get it. What I wanted to get to, though, is because we always talk about cinematography, right? And in the classical traditional sense, the cinematographer is going to lay out a shot, but it's usually a live shot. Like we've talked about cinematography in Nebraska. You could talk about it in even like a Lord of the Rings movie, or even the cinematography that was done in Nonstop, which we talked about. In this, there's no set. It's all set, but there's no real location. And to me, it's like, is that cinematography, or what is I'm curious. I would love to, and I was trying to look for interviews with the cinematographer about this. Like, how does a cinematographer work in this environment? Because
you have to, you have to very much be part and it's a perfect synchronization between shooting it and also, for lack of a better term, digitizing it with the visual effects. Because at the end of the day, you need the green screen needs to be placed in the correct spots, and you need to account for if at the end of the day this is supposed to look like a boat, well, where's the front of the ship? Where the heck are we? And how are we going to see the rest of it?
Right. Yeah. It just, to me, because the gentleman who was Simon Dugan.
And by the way, sorry not to cut you off, but and also in that sense, just even shooting it, in this sense, you have to know how it's going to cut together. So again, we talked about the zoom in shots. They had very specific shots that they knew how to do them, and you have to go from a wide to a close up, and when do you do that? So
I understand,
and I think also the look to this movie compared to the original. The original was like real. All the Spartans wore like red clothing. They had their armor plus the red cape that all of them had, and then this one we had the army wearing blue. So like even that distinction from one movie to another, even though the overall environmental looks look the same, but them people, you can tell that these were two different stories in that way.
I mean, contrast of color from them to
we
the
had red to
Persians,
blue,
which was very heavy, and like the gold, the silver, the black. Just looks of it keeping it.
Yeah, no, but again, just going back, looking at some of this guy's other work. Well, he did The Great Gatsby, which if you saw The Great Gatsby and you saw it in 3D, I mean, you can't say, whether you were a fan of Baz Luhrmann or not, you can't say that movie didn't look good, and that he knew how to like move the camera, and it looked fantastic in 3D, which.
With the green light, I mean, to make that green light work, if you know what I'm talking about, get The Great Gatsby again. He just tied it in so well.
Yeah, but you also get the sense though that The Green Gatsby wasn't shot 100% green screen. Yeah. So again, I would love to talk to this guy, like when you're in a soundstage, and it's just all green. Like, what are you focusing at? Like, has somebody given him to say in this background, like it's just. because the lighting isn't done from your camera. It's not done. You can light this because it's shot digitally on your computer screen, like right there and then. So is that where the cinematographer is, on top of where he's setting the camera? Is he also looking at the computer screen going, oh, you know what, we should bring this level up more. We want the moon to look like this. It seems to be almost a different set of application than, right? So I just would love to be able to talk to this guy and pick his brain on how, as a cinematographer, do you shoot?
I mean, in that respect, you talked just even about the moon. You have to know, okay, how in this fake world is the light going to hit these people's faces, and so I have to account for, okay, the moon's there,
right?
And how's it, this. Sometimes, costumers and cinematographers, they go to a level where I'm just not able to go. But, like, even just how certain cloths reflect different types of light and things like that. And so they get into all of that.
Yeah.
That, to me, is the fascinating part.
Yeah, and, visual effects supervisors are usually in charge of that. When they're using blue and green screen, they have to know the camera has to be at this exact angle to the actors, who has to be at this exact angle to the light behind them. So that's what is really used in this movie, and I thought it was really done well. I don't think, yes, it was artificial lighting, but nothing was really off that bothered me.
No,
I agree.
Not at all.
I remember actually thinking, like, this lighting is wonderful, like the silhouette of the glow, especially like coming off their shoulders and gleaming off their armor, I thought was done very well. It always struck me in, like, a very pleasant way, not in a, like, glaring, oh, that's coming from the wrong angle or whatnot.
No, and again, I'm gonna say the dust. Like, there was dust in every scene because, you're looking at sandy Greece or Sparta, or there were embers flying because, and again, in 3D, it was like, who is the guy that had to just, like, and they put in so many, and there were particles, and they're just floating around. People would be talking like we are, and dust particles just floating around. And in 3D, yeah, they did a great job. So, and another thing that I found very interesting is because this all was done on soundstage, like, so a Greek ship, because I think the David and Goliath aspect of this movie was, the Greek ships were,
tiny.
They were tiny. When you saw, like, the Persian ships, man, these things were big, but they were so big that they had to cut them up in thirds. So they'd have a part in one soundstage, the middle part in the other soundstage, the back part in the other. That had to be a daunting task because you have to fill, especially with fight sequences. Fight sequences that didn't just stay on the front part of a ship, but moved over into a middle part of a ship and then might come back, and, like, the choreographing and mapping all that out. That had to have been, that's a Herculean, a Greek reference, task, to go from one soundstage you got to set up, go into another soundstage, set up, go to the other, we got to film all our shots that are taking place in the front part of the ship. So,
and precision.
Yeah,
precision
absolutely.
And
That's when you get the Legos out.
Right.
No, I mean, so there's a lot of directors that I know, they'll get out their Legos and, like, even for simpler things, they'll, okay, how would it look?
Yeah, so
and that's what I love about it. I mean, it's no different than, as Eva Green describes it, this not vanilla sex scene. She's got her map, and it's 3D of, like, okay, where's the ships and things like that. So yeah, I mean, 8 months to film. I mean, this was a juggling act on all parts.
Absolutely. You would figure something like this might be even more than 8 months.
Yeah.
To do. I mean, even though it's on green screen, it was a big task to do.
Just green screen, it's just the fight scenes. Fight scenes take a long time.
Yeah.
20 seconds of a fight scene can take, like, 4 days.
Yeah. Yeah. And we talked about that at Nonstop as well. Like, a scene that's like 20 seconds took, over 2 days to shoot. And getting all the angles. But no, they did a really good job, and especially, like, this director, who this is his first, let's say, epic feature film. He had done a smaller independent movie, I believe, called Smart People. But, when you're going from something like that, and, I mean, I have to, Zack Snyder calls you to come up to direct 300, and the only thing you've done is smaller commercials and then Smart People, you're like, that's got to put some pressure on him.
Definite
say.
pressure. The good news is he was surrounded by some very seasoned people.
Yeah.
On all facets, and like, I think that must have been such a wonderful experience for him. Like, yes, there's a pressure, and you have all these fans already lining up who want to see this and want information, but you are being backed by people who know it very well. And I mean, I want to make a call out to the costume designer, because I thought that was also a standout performance in this, and she was seasoned. Her name's Alexandra Byrne, and she's an Academy Award winning costume designer. She does epics like the Avengers and Thor, but she's also done like Finding Neverland, and she won for, I think it was Elizabeth or Elizabeth II, one of them. It was either Elizabeth or Elizabeth the Golden Age. I know she was nominated for both, but I think her work in this and just the support he must have had, because all of these different, whether it's technical specs, lighting specs, or the costumes, they were all adding up in his favor. Yeah. And so I thought he had a lot of really good ingredients to make this film.
And again, it's something we always talk about, the collaborative effort. And when you are surrounded by smart, good people, it tends to show sometimes.
What I like what's always nice sometimes in cinematography is when you get to really hold the shots up in a different way, in a heavy light, right? And so with the storytelling aspect of this, how many times did we go to that arrow shot of Darius being shot? You know what I mean?
Well, that arrow
that
was
became
very
motifs.
incredible if you really think about it. So
It
we
was.
needed to keep reliving the arrow.
But I liked how they used the arrow, because every time we saw it, it was from different perspectives. We saw the Mysticles' version, we saw Eva's version, we saw Xerxes' version of how the arrow was shot. So I liked how they used that as a narrative kind of point.
That's very true.
And so I liked that aspect about, for me in terms of the editing, that was the fun part, and again, we mentioned, so it's about that perspective, but then also how it ties into 300, the original. Okay, it's a different perspective, so we're gonna edit it a little bit differently, we're gonna shoot it a little bit differently, and bring it full circle.
Yeah. Oh, another great scene, thinking back to, is the scene where Artemisia was speaking, that we're talking about arrows, and they're dumping all the oil into the sea. You sort of had an idea. Now, again, being a Game of Thrones fan, I was thinking of that scene in Game of Thrones when they blew up the sea, so to speak. But when the sea caught fire and there was that boat explosion, again, that too looked, in 3D, it looked amazing. It was almost as if I could feel the heat. And it was a really, I loved, she sends those people into the water with the turtlebacks, so to speak. And, you sort of had an idea as to what's going on. And when she lights that arrow, it shoots the guy in the back.
But even
And it's just another parallel to him. Like, it was
Yeah.
constantly throughout this film, like how they compared to each other and how they connected to each other. And to tie that into such an epic battle scene and make that that punch at the very end, I was like, on top of it looking great.
Yeah, it looked good.
I was like, okay, that's a good little tie in there.
Let's talk about the music. And Marissa, if you could, I want to start with that dun dun. And I can't do it, but
I'll try to find it.
It's almost like the Jaws. They use this music. Obviously, they had great music throughout, but this one in particular became a motif of when anything bad or mischievous was gonna happen.
It was a warning.
It was a warning, because we first heard it as King Darius died. Remember, it's just that note of like, oh wow, he's dead. And then from then on, anytime Artemisia is involved, something.
Well, it's like a sound of revenge. It's like I said, this oncoming slaughter. But the music and how it tied in not only to the feeling but to the actual actions, where drum beats and horns were sounding with lightning flashes, or in the beginning, even the horse and the boats and each arrow, and the slashing of swords, all of the just combination and out of nature of the music was so supporting and adds so much feeling, I think, to this movie. Oh, we're listening now.
Is this it? I don't know if this is quite it, but it's from the movie, so we'll just go with it.
It is from the movie.
Junkie
Symbols.
Extra Large. I don't know who Junkie XL is, but he's credited for being the guy who composed the score. So
Interesting.
yeah, Junkie XL. He was born December 8th in Lichtenvoorde, Gelderland in the Netherlands. Let's see. I mean, because personally, I don't know much about the gentleman other than other than where he was born, progressive music producer. So,
Which is interesting to be a progressive music producer, but really just be composing for the ancient past.
I mean, other movies that he's currently working on Mad Max Fury Road. He's done the music, he's done the music for Divergent. Bringing a baby. He has a Noom diploma, so to speak. He also goes under Tom Holkenborg.
Is that because it's easier to say?
I don't know. He did at 300. He's as Junkie XL. So I guess
in terms of the music, right? We talked about the slow motion throughout, and so when you have slow motion, obviously it's supposed to be hyper real and whatnot, and so you're gonna need sound effects to fill that.
Yeah.
But then also that's when you really need music to heighten it and to really bring it to its fullest. And so we've talked about movies so many times where the score is it helps, but it's kind of forgotten this, and I wish we had that. But that again, as you called it, Sarah, the revenge sound. I like that description for it. I thought that just stood out to me so much.
I'm just glad that they didn't revert to overusing the like whenever you go into slow motion, like they used it in the trailer, like when that guy jumps off one boat and the camera follows him down.
You're talking about where you do the reverse, so to heighten the moment, you take away the sound, and then when you come back into battle, everything's back.
Like that, but
that's also another technique. Yeah.
But I all in all, like the movie looked good, it sounded good. Although I will say the one thing about when I saw the original 300, I have to say the one thing that I came away from that more so than here, like you felt every sword cut and you heard just via the sound, like the sound design on the original 300, it could have been where I saw it. I mean, it just was amazing. The sound here was good. It sounded good and fine.
Well, you can take each sword cut and things like that. Yeah. Here, for the most part, you had ships crashing at the ship. So you can't repeat a crash of a ship 3 times within 3 seconds.
Yeah.
Definitely.
It wouldn't make sense.
I will say that like what I did take away from this movie as opposed to the original 300 was just the variety of battle scenes on water. I think that was great. And Artemisia, she stole the show. What I want is I wish that there was another iconic line. I think that from 300, with Leonidas, it will never stop being "This is Sparta," and
or King Leonidas and his 300 men on a stroll.
Right.
And so it's like that. It's just like. It even replays itself in my head during during Rise of the Empire. So that was my one like nitpicky thing. I was like, I want a co-line. I want I could get possibly "This is war" from Xerxes or like war and how he said war, but
I thought they were trying to force that. I'll be honest with you. I thought in some of the speeches with Themistocles, I think they were trying to force.
They were trying to find one.
And that's why for me, I don't know. The speeches didn't quite have, I'm going to use the gravitas, so to speak, of Gerard Butler. Gerard Butler was really great as Leonidas. And I like this.
Although
Sullivan.
He has referred to it as not being his thing.
Right. Yes, because it's not my thing.
Really? Are you sure? Because I think that's what most people like you in.
I agree, but
maybe you should rethink that.
Sullivan Stapleton. Now he's on a show. I think it's a Showtime show, Strike Back. Mm-hmm. And now I'm not a big follower of Strike Back, but occasionally I'll sit and watch an episode because it is action packed. And what's great about it is they'll do these little making of things, and this Sullivan Stapleton is always in them, and he's always like, "Oh yeah, today I had to jump out of a car," but he loves throwing himself into this stuff, and he just seems like he relished this role.
He seems like a very nice guy. I think right now he's shooting in Thailand, and he's from Australia, and
they make good Greeks.
Yeah, but in interviews he seems very nice
Yeah.
and kind, and like he a lot of stuff it's always brought up. The abs are always brought up, and he's just like, I didn't think I could have 6-packs. I did not think that was something that I would ever be able to do. And through maintaining a yogurt diet and craziness, he was able to. But he does seem like a very, maybe it's an Australian thing, just very like fun loving and but willing to throw himself into projects like this. So.
Well, I looked up quotes, and here's a quote, that better we show them we choose to die on our feet rather than live on our knees. Like
but that's a stolen quote.
But it's a quote, and again, I think they were trying to...
when I say stolen, that's just because that quote has been said before. And
I would rather die free than live as a slave.
Nah,
no,
already been said.
Oh.
Yeah,
but
even if I was attached to you by chain?
Maybe.
Okay.
All right, guys. Final thoughts on 300: Rise of an Empire.
Final thoughts are I loved that it wasn't what we expected. I loved that the strong female characters, and I'm excited for them to expand this world, and they definitely have the opportunities to make even more of these, which I hope they do.
Well, they have to. I mean, they have to.
I need a new signature line, but I want the slow-mos and the crazy action, and I think everyone did a very nice job.
Yeah, I think we should mention too that the movie, opened up on March 7th. We should talk that the production budget was $110 million for this movie, and that the total P&A is $150. So it opened up number 1 in the box office to a nice $45 million. Now that's less than the original 300 came to, but you are talking about a sequel that's 7 years from the original.
There's quite a gap there.
Yeah, so it has that going sort of kind of against it, but your total domestic gross is around 56 million, and your foreign and domestic gross is 145. So look, I think with the foreign gross coming up, we'll see how it does this weekend. It has a 42% on Rotten Tomatoes, which for a movie like this, but it's not crushing. Like, if it was in the teens or lower, that would have been crushing. But we'll see how it plays out. I think overseas it's going to do really well, and I think when the time is made to make the decision to go on to make another one, they're going to be thinking more heavily overseas than they are going to be, like, say, domestically.
Which is interesting, because that's something we've said a lot about our action
we've
films,
talked about,
and a lot of the films that are coming out now where foreign is really pulling in some of the big bucks.
Yeah, and if you're looking at a movie, again, no big slouch. It's not that it's 45 million was awful, but that's going to be a struggle to get to 100.
Yeah.
Say, personally, I thought the movie, I had a good time with this movie. It didn't make me angry. I enjoyed a lot of how it looked. I loved the detail. I loved the following of a female character. Ava Green was great. And it was good to have good, strong women characters. I liked everybody else as well. I had a good time. I had a better time than I expected.
And on that note, last thoughts, Marissa.
I agree. I mean, I loved strong women and, women power. Go them, especially in such a masculine movie. I thought Eva Green and Lena Headey, they both depicted really nice female characters that you wanted to watch, and you wanted to match them up against these strong brute guys. So I think that was well done. Overall, it was a very fun movie. I like the timing and how the timing of the year they released this movie after all the Academy Awards, and it was before the summer blockbusters that came out. So I thought it was actually good timing for them, that this is like really the only action movie that's out right now, and I think that helps drawing the audience in. And overall, it was a really fun movie. Yes, it was 7 years later after the original, but you know what? That doesn't mind. I don't mind that, and overall, it was a fun movie.
All right, and on that note, this dissection is complete. Thank you guys for tuning in yet again. And we'll be back for another dissection. Definitely check us out. We got Grand. I always keep calling it Grand Budapest.
Were you going to call it Grand Theft Auto?
No, I was going to call it Grand Hotel Budapest.
Grand Budapest Hotel.
There you go. We got that coming up. We've got Veronica Mars coming up. We've got Divergent.
Bad words, Divergence.
We got a lot, Winter's Tale, or Winter Soldier.
Winter Soldier, Captain America.
Winter's Tale already happened.
Yeah.
Yes.
We didn't talk about it.
We need to. They're
We'll talk
combining
about
so
it
many
on
of these
Blu-ray.
different titles. So keep tuning in, and the number one thing you can do is, hey, spread the word. If you're listening to us and like us, just tell a friend, tell a coworker, tell a family member. It doesn't matter who you tell. Tell people on the street. Just help spread the word, because you know what? It just helps us, and we like you. So the fan response has been great. So continue
Thanks, guys.
Yeah,
And,
thanks.
Until next time,
And
this
thank
has
everybody
been
else.
Anatomy of a Movie.
From producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the rest of the Anatomy of a Movie staff, we would like to thank you for listening and subscribing to the show. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to email or tweet us. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been Anatomy of a Movie.
Thanks for watching Anatomy of a Movie on YouTube. For more on your favorite movies, subscribe to our channel here, and be sure to let us know what you think in our comment section below here. Bye.
This was going to be a sequel, because they show Leonidas, in the trailer and such. But, it was always a wonder, so where are they going to go? So running the concurrent story, as this one does to that, I thought was that's a clever way to do this, and that's a very smart way.
Yeah, I mean, it was so hard. Like, you had Leonidas and the 300 die, or almost all of the 300 die. Like, how do you go after that? And we got, at the end of 300, the original, we got that start of an epic battle scene on, some hillside, and then you're transported, and that's what I thought we were going to see. And then it was instead this whole naval battle, which I just found so much fun and so interesting, because it's not something that I've seen very often. So I think it was probably the most surprising point for me was the basis of this movie, that it was going on at the same time and wasn't what I expected. I also liked that the main focus was kind of on the villain. It was on her versus some, obviously we had Sullivan leading the Greek side.
Yeah,
Themistocles. Call him the Athenian. It's
The
easier.
Athenian.
That's what that was the insulting thing by the Spartans to him. You Athenian.
You Athenian. Yeah, Themistocles.
Yeah,
That's pretty much easy
I
for
agree.
me to say.
I like the new version of this kind of story, because with the original 300 we had the whole battle on dry land, and then we had this humongous battle with more people on the water, which I thought was a nice play. And I liked how they took the non-linear kind of aspect for this film, because we had a lot of flashbacks, and then that leading up to the current story that ties in with the original 300, and then going past that point. So I thought that was really nice how they executed it.
And they kept in the obviously visual stylings of 300, but more importantly, the retelling of the story. Right, we open up pretty much like last one.
The Athenians, and I got all that. That's fine. It just seemed it went very well into the movie, where there just seemed to be scenes where it stopped to do some more storytelling. And it was they could have done that, I think, whether it be editing, which they did, because they would go back to the Battle of 300 and stuff. So I don't know. Like I said, I felt this movie had a lot of exposition going for it.
And I'm not this
coupled
guy.
with slow-mo.
I'm not saying that it didn't have a lot of exposition. I'm saying that I thought I liked the exposition. I liked the storytelling. I think that was very much what you said. That's what this is all about. It's about all these stories and these fanciful versions of histories. And you brought up the introduction of Xerxes' background, and that to me I just found so crazy, because when I think of the actor in this movie, it's so different and incredible, the makeup they do on him, that literally I was like, wait, is that the same actor? Did they hire a different actor to play beginning Xerxes and then another one to play God King? But I was like, because he looks so incredibly different. The only similar feature that stands out is his eyes.
Yeah.
Everything else you think was digital or literally another human being. And I was it made me pull back a second, and I was oh wow, they do a really good job making him up into his god king self.
Well, before we get into that, since we're talking story primarily, this was obviously based off of Frank Miller. Yeah. But it was based off of, so was 300, and this, I imagine as this franchise continues, which there's no way it can't. It was from a comic book that isn't yet published.
Right.
Keyword being yet, because now with this, it just makes sense to publish it.
Yeah, and we'll see how closely it relates.
We begin where we end in some sense, and the queen is telling her story to the Spartans. So that was a nice through line.
I did affectionately nickname this movie 300: The Rise of Exposition. There was one thing about this movie where there was a hell, like, we're just going to stop the movie now and give you a bunch of exposition. And I was like, okay, we could get on. But what I getting to your point, at the beginning, it was fine because it was setting it up. But it just seemed for me that there were many places where it just stopped to give us exposition, and I was like sort of kind of getting it already, and it's like, oh, more exposition.
But I disagree, because I felt like this film was really trying to flesh out the world of 300. So we were getting, like, you get the bookends of Queen Gora's speech, and then within that you get like story within story within story. You're doing a lot of, I guess, like time travel almost with your mind. And I thought that was interesting, because it was happening a lot in the beginning. But for me, that also drew me out of the fact of, I went into this movie being like, okay, like, Sarah, you love these type of movies. You love, like, the crazy, fantastical, like, ancient Greece, ancient mythology. Like, I love all that. And I was like, do not try and compare this exactly to the first 300. Because the first 300 was very, it was unexpected. Like, it wasn't known that it was going to get this huge fan base. And
they sort of kind of did. The movie, like, was huge. The movie did, like, 75
But you didn't
million.
expect everyone to go around, like, screaming, "This is Sparta," and, like...
I don't know. Like, Warner Brothers, when it came out, yeah, they actually had this pegged as being,
I think
like,
as an audience member, when I went into the original 300, I had no idea what to really expect.
Yeah. No.
And then going into this one, I didn't want to think, oh, compare this to Gerald Butler in 300. I didn't want to nitpick and think, oh, that was better.
I'm opening. We have an eye, sort of a nostril, 2 teeth. One of the teeth has a small cavity.
Close call, folks, but I think we got here just in time.
Presented by Maria Menounos and Kevin Undergaro. This is Anatomy of a Movie. In-depth discussions and breakdowns of various movie titles. And now that you've seen the movie, let the dissection begin.
Welcome, my friends, to another battle of the gods. I'm your host, Phil Svitek, joined alongside Dimitri Panos.
Long live Athens.
We had to bring a Greek on board. And Sarah Stratton, not Greek.
I'm not Greek. I'll represent the Persians.
I will represent the one and only Greek that will be in 300.
That is
and we have Marissa Serafini.
Hello, everyone.
And the music stylings of Junkie Extra Large.
Yeah.
So the follow-up to 300, obviously if you're listening, we're doing 300, Rise of an Empire, the follow-up to 300, but in many ways it's a prequel.
I'd say
It's
more
an
of a
equal.
companion.
Oh my gosh.
It's an
prologue.
equal.
It's a meanwhile. While this is going on, this
Yeah.
other part is going on.
The creators called it a companion, which I think is a fitting term.
They actually call it a prequel sequel. It's an equal.
Which
is
that
fun.
was the
I
quote.
loved all the nuggets that, how it tied back into so many of the various things.
That actually was probably, to me, the most clever aspect of because I didn't see it coming. They don't showcase it necessarily in the marketing. The marketing, the trailers and everything really said that
here he was a better hero here. I really wanted to go into this just willing to like embrace the world. And the fact that they did add so much that you had to think about in the beginning, and that they were pulling you through like time and space.
Wow, you really thought about see again, there wasn't much that they there wasn't anything to think about. They really did like lay out their roadmap. And again, going back to their clever device was running it concurrently with the events that happened in 300.
But
and
in the very beginning, they weren't running it concurrently. In the beginning, you have Lena who's
right.
Ahead of time, and then you have she goes back to the start of
right.
before Xerxes was a god king,
right? Which was
so
nice.
That's pulling you back,
which was
you
nice
history there.
Sure, and that was
I
good
think
play.
That drawing those different stories, it made the audience have to be like, wait, what? Where are we? What story are we telling? And it drew away from the fact, like it brought in a different point of view. And I think that not going directly to expectations with those first couple of scenes was smart.
Yeah, I mean, no, listen, they gave you backstory to Xerxes, which is fine because
I think,
it didn't bother me.
It was very much deliberate in a comic book sense. It was very, and I think in some ways, it's deliberate in the sense that in Greece, and especially in these early times, these stories were told over fires and things like that. And so it felt almost like that, except in a weird different medium, because obviously you're watching someone kind of retelling a story, but in a movie theater.
Sure.
You know what I mean? But I didn't mind it. There's definitely movies that are just so exposition heavy because they have no other way. This was very deliberate choice, and it wasn't for lack of creativity. It was for hey, we're gonna make a statement.
Yeah, well, no, they made a statement, and again, I didn't mind the backstory to Xerxes. Like, that's good for like where he comes from and how he became to be, and it furthered, the more the implication of how Sparta got in the war, and